Sunday rolls around quicker than he expects. Homework not exactly hard, but time-consuming, and during the week he had been busy making purchases here and there for his new room. Basic cutlery and plates for one, and when he looked at the price of a small rice cooker, he resigned himself to buying it the week after the laptop. As generous as Shido's weekly stipend currently is, he's banned himself from drawing any more than the limit. Every day for the past week he's checked his dorm room for any bugs Shido may have slipped in. But perhaps it's too much effort to rig a room that's not already pre-prepared. No matter his best efforts, Akechi can't find anything recording his activities. He lets himself relax by Saturday, setting the small cactus that the old lady, Saito, gifted him when he came back from school on the windowsill. Something about buying it spontaneously for a grandkid before realizing that a cactus wouldn't go well in the post, which they shared a little after before Akechi retired to his room holding the plant and Saito went back to her office. It looks good against the bare room, a little splotch of spiky green in the gentle pink of the wallpaper, the light hitting that perfect slant that gave the air a touch of rose gold. When he did his homework that day at his desk, tiny diamond dust motes floated in the still air, shifting only with his breath. Nothing manages to ruin the rest of the day, as the quiet and warmth of the afternoon melds into a vibrant, violent, streaked sunset that paints the clouds into a veritable watercolor kingdom. Akechi finishes his homework with time to spare, with which he treats himself with a short trip to LeBlanc. Sojiro's curry and the calm atmosphere, a perfect complement to his pleasant evening. He sleeps soundly that night, waking refreshed to tackle the impending problem. Sunday meant Shido. Currently, he holds the advantage. He has done his best not to let Shido pry into his life, while he had 2.5 years of knowledge on him. Secondly, there's only 2 sources of information Shido can gain of the metaverse. One is him. As the only known person to fully enter the metaverse right now, as long as Shido trusts him, whatever Akechi says will be considered truth as it comes straight from the source. The second source is Wakaba Ishiki's research. Ishiki, one of his first murder by shadows. She was the 3rd one? The 4th one? If he remembers correctly, Ishiki's murder was 2 months into Shido's experiments. Today was June 1st, right at the beginning of summer. The day had been a hot one, the metaverse filled with burning shadows as he crept through its dark hallways and ended up in front of Ishiki's. August heat had transferred into everyone's consciousness through the moans and complaints of how the heat was making everything so much harder. In contrast, Ishiki's shadow had been calm, had stared at the end of his gum with a sort of resignation. She had said only 2 things. So, it's time. And, I'm sorry, Futaba. Akechi remembers he had been feeling the heat himself and just shot the shadow without much care. Ishiki had tried to put up a fight but was ultimately too weak against Robin Hood. Loki had appeared later, dissipating into wisps sooner than he expected. Murder was easy, especially if they were just a shadowy, exaggerated mockery of their true selves with blazing yellow eyes. Shadows shed no blood, after all. Now that he thinks about it, he never really did get to see Ishiki's notes on the metaverse. Shido took them all away before he'd even had a chance to. In fact, all Akechi had been allowed to know was a once-off flash of regret in Shido's eyes when Akechi reported that Ishiki's mind had broken down. It's a shame. She was a true genius, was all Shido ever said before he was dismissed to get back to his own life. To be honest, Akechi hadn't even really known who she was, her importance and what she did, until Futaba Sakura. But now, Akechi rests his chin onto his folded hands in thought, looking at his calendar. She's still alive. Furthermore, she and Sojiro Sakura are close friends. He smiles, rising up to get dressed. In the mirror, he's satisfied to see an impeccably dressed teen, casual enough not to raise eyebrows, but well kept to a point where adults would look at him favorably. It's enough for upkeeping Shido's expectations of him as a petty gold-digging, attention-seeking teen, but it's also enough for someone like Wakaba Ishiki, a mother of a kid similar in age. Akechi wouldn't mind getting a genius as an ally. The day passes quickly. After leaving his dorm, waving to Saito-san, continuing her knitting in her office as he did so, he goes to a nearby library to check into his emails and see whether he's accepted into the investigations internship yet. No response. Well, as he expected really, he thinks as he clicked out of the browser and takes a small walk around the fiction section, eyes lingering on a few new, old, volumes of Featherman R before leaving. He spends the rest of the day casually, scouting the city to familiarize himself with Tokyo again. This time, he chooses Akiba, and the vibrant youth culture and various pop and niche culture stalls wash over him in a wave of chatter. There's a slight breeze that's wafting through the streets today, enough to make his hair ruffle, but warm enough to make people grimace. At 7 p.m. sharp, he walks into Shido's fancy apartment from last week. At the bell, a maid opens the door, face young and pretty, and Akechi tries not to feel disgusted that the girl's age is barely older than his own. She couldn't possibly have been more than 20, and there's only one reason why Shido would want a young and pretty maid in his private apartment after all. Shido's indiscretions are wide and vast, Akechi thinks, dry. He should have gotten used to it by now. Shido-sama's in the study room, the girl says quietly, as Akechi takes his shoes off and puts them to the side, handing him a pair of slippers. It's the first room you see to the right past the living room. Thank you. Akechi smiles pleasantly at the girl, before padding his way past the living room, where he'd negotiated before, the night view still a stunning visage to the left, before he knocked on the door the maid had indicated. Come in, Shido's voice rumbles, and Akechi takes his cue. As expected, the large study is dimly lit, with one large desk with Shido seated and no seat for him. He stands in front instead, comfortably putting his hands in his pocket where his mobile is, his screen unlocked with the metanav open. What have you been doing this week? Shido opens, his eyes already taken in Akechi's changing clothes, his confident demeanor. School, Akechi provides. At Shido's near imperceptible frown for more information, he adds, there was a Japanese history assignment. The dorm is comfortable. Are you sure you don't wish for your own apartment? Shido asks, and Akechi gives a polite chuckle. I've already settled down where I am, so please don't worry about me, Shido-san. He looks up and tries to breathe normally at Shido's assessing gaze. In the past, Shido had always looked at Akechi with a marked disinterest, his gaze always a step past where Akechi always stood, distracted, no matter what Akechi did or tried to impress him with. He doesn't want to guess what he has done to make Shido look at him now with such intense focus. Are we going to begin experimentation now? Akechi asks when the pause stretches a little too long, and Shido doesn't seem to acknowledge that he had gotten lost in thought. Show me how you enter the metaverse, Shido says abruptly, his eyes glittering with a dark interest that Akechi politely ignores. All right. Akechi shrugs, and the hand holding his phone in his pocket taps the metanav button alongside the motion. As if by magic, the world around them starts to warp and Shido disappears from his vision. The apartment is silent. The higher up you enter the metaverse, the clearer it is. There are no shadows, no distortions, no birds or the sounds of the young maid in the kitchen. He moves immediately. Crossing the room, he looks at the papers left on Shido's desk. Mementos is the amalgamation of everyone's hearts, that's true. That's why the dark underground is a maze, where the shadows love to lurk as they've symbolically hidden from the greater world around them. But up in a fancy high-rise, everyone's dreams of the rich are reflected here, keeping everything luxurious and immaculate. It's hard to get up here, usually. Many apartments are broken in the metaverse, and elevator shafts and stairwells are often broken or out of reach, making the rich elite even further to grasp. Most importantly, though, is that this is Shido's private place, and his own personal feelings and thoughts will be reflected the most. Akechi had been banking on that, as he starts rifling through all of the documents. Half of the papers on the desk are blank, deemed by Shido's cognition as unimportant. The other half, Akechi quickly takes a photo of each. Even if there's only one sentence on the page, it's a sentence that Shido's paid attention to. He quickly reaches into the desk's drawers too, taking a picture of everything. Photos, file names, everything he can reach. He takes special care to take a picture of all 3 types of Shido's signatures and saves all of it in the encrypted storage location on his phone. There's a vicious sort of satisfaction in doing this, and Akechi hums a little as he steps back and stands right back where he started. Turning Shido's paranoia to his advantage feels good. Akechi checks the time, 5 minutes, and carefully wipes any satisfaction off his face. He jogs a little, making himself sweat. He has always been the type to flush easily, and there you go. He exits the metaverse, and Shido warps back into his chair, one of his fingers tapping the chair in impatience. Sorry, Akechi says apologetically, a little out of breath, a smile that's fishing for sympathy on his face. Going to the metaverse takes a little out of me. I'm sure it'll get better with time. Just like last time, Shido asks him a series of questions. How do you get to the metaverse? I just focus, and suddenly the world is different. What do you see? Generally, there are the shadows of other people when I entered the metaverse from the ground. It's a distorted version of reality, in summary. Shadows? Everyone has something they have to hide, and they seem to manifest in that other reality. It's a back and forth that Akechi has prepared for, and nothing really blindsides him. The first few sessions are tame after all, and Shido is still reaping information from him and Wakaba Ishiki. After an hour of going in and out of the metaverse a few more times and answering more questions, Shido hums. That's enough for today. Good job. Shido adds, and Akechi reacts like he knows how his younger self would to the praise, quickly hiding a delighted smile under his normal facade. Anytime, Shido-san. Next week? Actually, use this. Akechi strides forward to pick up the PDA that Shido gives him, and it's a familiar weight in his hand. I'll contact you through this. We'll be switching locations next week. Okay, Shido-san. Akechi smiles as he pockets the new phone. I will see you in a week. With an impatient grunt, Shido has already looked back down at his papers, and Akechi knows to leave as silently as he can. Outside, the smell of steamed fish and vegetables hits his nose as he beelines straight for the door before there's a last authoritative command from behind. Wait, Akechi. Akechi doesn't as much freeze as he gently lets out a breath and pivots on his heel. Shido's at the doorway, eyeing the maid cooking in the kitchen before his attention rests back on him. I heard you applied for an internship at the police investigations department. Yes, I have some free time as my studies at Shogaku are less strenuous than expected. Thinking of my future, I wish to hold some internships related to law enforcement and such, as I always had an interest in those areas. It's a good, honest student response, and Shido just replies with a scrutinizing, If you wish me to, I can help you get a higher position in a higher division, such as the Special Investigations Department. No, Akechi replies on instinct. He has to swallow his surprise before he tacks on, That's not necessary, thank you. Shido had never offered anything in his past life past contracts. Akechi had always been the one manipulating, pushing, implying, and scheming to get to where he'd been in the past, with Shido handing out favors when he saw fit. Why was he offering this now? Was he concerned about how his control measures had failed? Did he want to add more debt? This is just something casual to fill my time in my future resume. Akechi continues, pleasant smile firmly on his face. It won't affect my activities with you at all, Shido-san. There's a moment where Shido is still, his eyes considering Akechi before his face turns into a smirk. I see, Shido replies, and Akechi pushes back a spike of alarm that goes through his spine. That tone. That's the tone whenever Shido got what he wanted. Goodbye, Akechi, Shido says now, a touch smug and detached as he heads toward the maid in the kitchen who has already put down her utensils. She's batting her eyelashes, twirling one of her apron strings with a teasing finger, and Akechi forces himself to relax and reply with a light, Good evening, Shido-san. As he walks away, his hands involuntarily find where the bullet hole had once been in his chest. It's all right, he has to tell himself. You have a lot of material to sift through to predict what Shido's planning, and you remember every single one of your hits. You know who is in his faction and who will be seen as a threat, and even if Shido grows as strong as he did in your past life, the Phantom Thieves will bring him down. Just a bunch of renegade teens that will bring him to his knees. You're fine. His heart is beating. Don't waste your life on Shido. Stick to your plan. Akechi breathes in the smog of Tokyo streets. A bus drives down the street in a plume of black smoke. He lets himself sit in a small eating area in a convenience store, the unflattering fluorescent lights making every tired businessman around him look like tired ghosts, all eating within their own isolation. It's a shared misery that soothes Akechi when he stands up and chucks his rubbish in the bin, footsteps steadier now as he heads back to the dorm. He wishes that Shido didn't affect him so much. Shido would hardly whip out a gun and kill him now. He was still a valuable resource. But emotions, as always, are illogical. The next afternoon after school finds him in the Blanc, a cap over his hair as he finishes his curry. Over at the bar table is a bespectacled woman who is currently teasing a tired Sojiro Sakura, happily sharing cute stories of her daughter for the past 15 minutes. There's a moment where Sojiro grumpily tells Wakaba to watch the shop for a bit as he goes upstairs to get something, and that's when Akechi stands, drawing his face mask back over his face and heads towards the door. When he passes the woman, he pauses, as if checking his pockets. "Wakaba Ishiki, this is about Shido. Meet me outside in 5 minutes. You may be in danger. Do not alert anyone." Patting his pockets as if satisfied his phone and wallet are still there, he heads outside and crosses the road, pulling out his phone and fiddling with it like any other bored teen waiting for his friends. It's only been 4 minutes when the Blanc's doors open again, and Wakaba Ishiki's laughter is suddenly loud on the street. "Stop being such a sourpuss, Sojiro. I'll come back later. I can't help it that I've forgotten my wallet." Contrary to her laughing off a few unsavory mumbles from behind, Ishiki's eyes are sharp beneath her glasses. Akechi nods at her and starts down the street towards Shibuya Station, in a bid for her to follow. A few alleyways down, Akechi ducks into an old izakaya, where he knows there are partition stalls. Although there are dusty security cameras in the corners, Akechi also knows that the old couple had stopped servicing them years ago. There will be a brawl here in 3 months, and the old couple failed to provide footage, claiming they thought it was a waste of electricity. It's knowledge that comes in handy now. There are already a bunch of hardy locals inside in the early evening, rowdy after work, and Akechi smiles sunnily at the old woman behind the counter under his mask. "Me and my ma want a cubicle, please," he says happily, tone pitched young, and the old lady bobs her head. "All right, head into the back." The old lady smiles just as Ishiki pushes through the flaps of the doorway behind him, following Akechi as he takes off his shoes and slides into a small cubicle. They both seat face to face with their knees nearly touching, and the small cloth barrier that sections their space off from the rest of the izakaya only hangs down to their knees. The loudness of the neighbouring group outside is sufficient though, and Akechi starts by taking off his cap and face mask. "Kid, don't say I'm your mother ever again," is Ishiki's first demand. Second, why the fuck is Shido sending me a kid? Akechi faces her with one of his televised smiles, folding his hands in his lap. "Ishiki-san, may I interest you with a proposal?"